we dive into authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us, from personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation. uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation. to authentic conversations about ourselves and our community.
Always wearing nothing but a towel.
The prosecutors come out and they just assemble all of the worst things that they can do because obviously it's easier to demonize a defendant. It's easier to make the jury hate the defendant. I mean, part of what trying a case is you want a juror to want to help your client. So prosecutors know that. So what do? They call them the defendant. They bring out the worst possible looks for them. They start off with the worst day that any defendant's ever had. That is
Peter, Emily Johnson running down the hall in a towel. That was Diddy. He did that to himself.
There's a reason why you're not supposed to have bad character evidence. There's a reason why judges make decisions as to whether it's more prejudicial than probative. That's the legal standard. And the reason they do that is you're not supposed to convict or prosecute by proxy. You're supposed to, as Harvey kind of set it up. Exactly. I get it, Nancy. But the whole idea is there's a case.
They're crimes. That's Tuckapina. Come on.
They're crimes.
You're a veteran defense lawyer, but you know Garagos is totally lying right now.
Okay. I want to move on to something else because Nancy, you talked about this right off the top about extortion, that he was threatening to release these tapes. I want to see what you guys think of this because I don't see this loop being closed here. So the big one they talked about, they were in Cannes and on a boat, and Diddy accused Cassie of stealing drugs from him. And he threatened her with this freak-off video. And they get on a plane. And how did you get back to New York, the prosecutor says. And it says, on a commercial flight, I traded my seat to get away, but he traded to get next to me. So they go on from that. And they say, well, what did he show you? She says, freak-off videos. He played them for me on one of his laptops. He said he'd release them. Well, how did you feel? She says, trapped. And then they go on. And I think this is interesting. When you landed in New York, what did you do? Well, we went to dinner. And then he wanted to have a freak-off, so we had a freak-off. Why did you do it? To make him not threaten me. She never said that the extortion of saying I'm going to release the tape had anything to do with the freak-off. That had to do with drugs. So again, I don't see that they closed the loop on that. And I want to just give you one more. They talk about when she was dating Alex Klein, her now husband. The question, what if anything were you afraid would happen physically if you refused to do a freak-off? She says, I mean, it was always in the back of my mind that I would somehow be hurt by him. And she goes on to say she's worried about the tapes being released. So I'm confused about this because they've never connected the extortion to the freak-off, and that seems to be what they have to prove. Joe, am I off base here?
No, you're right. You're right. Look, you're 100% right, because even that testimony that you just heard and read, and you read it verbatim, is not extortion. An extortionate threat is, or an extortionate demand is, I will do this unless you give me this. I will release the tape unless you engage about stealing drugs or not stealing drugs, and that's not extortion. That's revenge, revenge porn. That's a different, maybe another crime. But all the crimes we've discussed so far are state crimes, and they are crimes. Nancy is right about that. They're crimes, and they have done a great job, the prosecution, at making Sean Combs look like a horrific human being, an absolute horrific human being. But we are talking about federal charges.
Thank you. Y'all.
I've been saying this to you since day one. Since reading the
Y'all
indictment,
probably feel like it's
the whole
Diddy.
case will boil down to one issue: consent.
We got to pull out the
Consent
biggest
or
guns
not
for
consent.
Diddy's
Because
ass.
everything else falls if there is consent. And if you look at some of those recordings of those text messages, the responses from her, they are consensual. And she could say on the witness stand, well, I wrote those things because I loved him.
Under duress or
It's
whatever.
hard for a jury to say, look, she's saying I want more freak off.
Okay, let me get in here.
What sex trafficking
because I do
person?
actually think Harvey's
What sex trafficked person says they want more sex trafficking? Like I
wrong on the premise here. I think both of you are doing a great job. You and Harvey and our friend Mark here down at the bottom, cherry picking certain facts and elements where maybe there were elements of consent present. We all heard the testimony, but there's other facts. Let's talk about the Kid Cudi testimony, shall we? Where Cassie Ventura is saying very clearly that Sean Combs, when she was briefly dating Kid Cudi throughout the on and off of Sean Combs' relationship, that Sean Combs violently and viciously threatened to blow this man's car up if Cassie Ventura left the freak off, left with Kid Cudi, and pursued romantic relationships with her. She then gets afraid, gets in the car with Kid Cudi when he pulls up to pick her up, and then ultimately Sean Combs says, not only am I going to release the tapes if you move forward with this Kid Cudi situation and relationship, I'm also going to hurt him and hurt you. And then we know via the New York Times, I believe, reported that Kid Cudi affirmed to them and their sourcing that a car blew up in his driveway some days after Sean Combs made that threat. So I think this is a clear example where the loop is closed, Harvey.
Well, certainly what they're opening the door for is racketeering, which we're going to get into in a minute. But the Kid Cudi thing is really interesting because she testified while she was dating Kid Cudi, she also was doing freak-offs with Diddy. And when asked why, her answer, and I still don't know how to process this, she said, it's my job. It was my job. And I'm wondering what that means.
It could mean several things, Harvey. You're right. It could mean, I was willingness, but it also could mean I didn't feel free to leave. It could mean that I was so in a constant, this is the psychological warfare, I think, that could be argued. I think it is subtly being argued. I think it will be more aggressively be argued by the prosecution later in the case and testimony. But that there was a constant fear of threat of physical violence, which is why I think they spent so much time harping, if you will, on the physical abuse. And also, let's note, ladies and gentlemen, one fact pattern can be true of a multitude of criminal activity. The same facts, the same dragging, kicking in the head and beating that does lay the case successfully for a state prosecution of domestic violence is also, and I believe it's clause 4 of the federal indictment, where they do go into detail about how physical abuse, kicking, punching, dragging, beating is a part of the criminal behavior that Sean Combs coerced in their broader racketeering count. So I think that's their plan.
I wonder,
Harvey,
Mark and
Harvey Levin.
Yes, Nancy.
No offense to you, Levin, or Garagos, or Tacopina, but you just don't get it, all right? You think a woman on this jury is going to believe that Cassie Ventura wanted to be filmed naked and glistening pursuant to Sean Combs' request, just drenched in baby oil, and literally choke on a male sex worker's urine as he took a massive piss into her mouth. She choked. You think that was consensual? Good luck selling that to a jury.
Hey, Mark, I was going to actually raise that because that testimony about Sean Combs and the sex worker both peeing on Cassie to a point where she's choking, whether or not she verbally objected.
In her mouth. You said on
in her mouth. In her mouth. In her mouth. And how does the defense overcome that? Because, whether she expressly said to him, don't do that or not, how are they going to overcome something like that? I mean, how will the defense?
I think that's exactly what they're counting on. I think they're counting on the fact that you get the Nancy Grace doesn't like baby oil or doesn't like being urinated on feeling, and that's what they're counting on. I think if you
take pretty a look, general. It's not just Nancy Grace.
I've been around long enough.
Combs
Nancy.
did this to himself. The state is not painting him out as a villain. He shot his own foot.
When Nancy calms down for a second, you seem to be kind of excited by all this, but hold on. There are some very
typical Garagos comment.
I'm responding to you, Nancy. I'm not going to say that this is what you're into, but there are a lot of people. I'm not into crushing mice with high heels, or I mean, not into a lot of things that are fetishes. I don't know what's going on. All I know is this is in somebody's private sexual behavior, and it isn't something that I'm comfortable getting into and piling onto and talking about. And by the way, I will just say,
And you
can
should
say
make
it's
that
not
argument to a jury. You
consensual.
notice Takapena got real quiet.
Why don't you just
No, I'm not
hold on
quiet.
Because he knows that's
I just
BS.
don't want to interrupt anybody. I just don't want to interrupt
Why don't you
anyone.
hold on for 1 second? I would find a lot of things more credible if the first place they went was not to a civil lawyer, and if the second place they went was not to a money lawyer. I would find things more credible. I would think if somebody is feeling this way, that you don't, it's kind of like what I always say when there's a civil auto accident case. Do you go to the hospital first, or do you call 1-800, I'm injured? And I think that those are the kinds of things that most people, if they're looking at this dispassionately, are gonna.
I don't think that applies anymore.
Joe, stop being quiet. Come on.
Discounting, Mark,
You want me
how
to just
battered
jump in?
women
We're
are
gonna do that?
treated, and
Okay.
that
why are
they
you
don't
being polite,
report
man?
their
Joe,
partner.
try to get a word in edgewise, Joe.
I know, Mark, I just don't want to be rude to anyone, but look, here's the deal. They're doing a great job making him out to be a horrific human being. We all knew that was coming, okay? Whether or not this amounts to federal crimes is another story. There's been so much evidence of consent in this case. Her being urinated on, whether she wants to or not, is not a federal crime. It's disgusting. It's not a federal crime. I mean, look,
It
let's
is
go
when it's
down
done
to
through coercion, though, right,
let's go
Joe?
down to the issue of, look, I was a former sex crimes prosecutor. Okay, so I am not insensitive to these issues that women have when they're sex crimes victims. I'm not. But I will say this to you. It's fair game and it's fodder that if someone claims to be raped by someone, it's fair game to question that. Why would they go back to their rapist, to their torturer, their tormentor, and have consensual sexual relations with them again?
It's called Stockholm syndrome. Am I right, Nancy Grace?
Okay.
Stockholm syndrome.
She said they had a good night. How do you have a
things.
good night?
Currently looking at United versus Diddy.
With someone who raped you. I mean, that's
By the way,
This is the psychological warfare, Joe.
Right.
Okay. By the way,
there's
Ebony
always an excuse
and
for some
Joe-
action, right? She didn't go to the police ever. She went to a lawyer. She went to write a book. She went to sell her book. She got $20 million.
She went to a lawyer years and years and years later.
And
I
never
am
went
not
to the
going to
police,
stand by and let the two of you guys pretend that women are not beaten and raped in marriages every day, and they don't tell police.
It's fair game.
Okay. So, look, my take is that Cassie is a really believable witness. And this cuts both ways, because from my eye, she talked about issues that maybe hurt the prosecution's case. She did, acknowledge love letters that were sent. She did acknowledge things about not only loving freak-offs, but loving them as recently as 2017, well into their relationship. I think this all makes her so much more believable that she's not trying to paint a picture of perfection on the prosecution side. But at the same time, when she says in texts that I would love to have another freak-off, and she said it in 2009, she said it in 2017, and they started dating in 2008, and that's when they started the freak-offs. When she starts talking about loving him, being jealous of Kim Porter, and wanting to be the main girl and doing freak-offs because she was afraid he would do it with another woman. I don't know. I mean,
Harvey,
she was honest, but does that not hurt her? Does it not hurt the prosecutor?
Let me ask you a basic question, Harvey. We know that men can rape their wives, right?
Yes.
We know that. And we know that if a husband were to rape his wife, or in this case, be in a romantic relationship and rape his romantic partner, that is still rape, even if after that particular rape instance occurs, they reconcile and then have a consensual sexual relationship. That does not negate the rape, correct?
It does not negate the rape.
That's not the factual pattern you have here. That's not what you have here. They didn't reconcile.
I'm asking.
She was in another relationship.
She
That's a
did.
different scenario. That's a different.
Cassie did say that at points in times in the situation, I'm calling this situation, I'm calling the thing a thing, that there were apes going on in her situationship with Diddy.
Different factual scenario. She did not reconcile with him. She was on another relationship already. So there was no reconciliation.
No, that's not true, Joe. They did reconcile. She said I was with them on
Well, they were on and off. They were on and off by that point.
So this was constantly reconciling and breaking up. Yes, of course it is, Joe. It's you never been in anything on again, off again? I have. So we reconcile, we break up.
I don't know a lot of women. And listen, I find when I was a prosecutor and prosecuting sex crimes cases, I found women jurors to be most harsh critics of women when they were testifying. I really did. And I found that if some woman testified that she was raped and then went back to their rapist and said, I love you, I miss you, can we make love again, and that kind of stuff, it really hurt the credibility of that witness. And I'm sorry. I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
That is a very short-sighted woman.
That's fair game.
That's a very short-sighted woman, Joe. No,
another fact, Ebony, is that it wasn't just that she loved or thought she loved him. She met him when she was 19. What do you know? Not that she just had feelings for him, but he held her career, her hopes, her dreams, her whole future. I mean, if I thought that I was going to lose my law license, my home, my children, my family, everything, my livelihood, I don't know what I...
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay sifted.